I'm with you. I do think there's definitely been some conversation and some challenges on not only where education's been, but where education could go, next. Mm-hmm. One of the things that you and I have had conversations with privately, right, has only been about the skill sets that the students need for the future, or students need now.
Right.
But one of them is also like, what are the unique experiences that you're creating outside of the classroom?
Sure.
And one of the things I love that you shared in your social platforms is that y'all just had a really cool field trip not too long ago, which was to capture the solar eclipse. Can you share with us a little bit more about that journey, about how that came about, and how did y'all experience it?
Well, let's talk about the skills first, and then we can talk about how that leads to the eclipse experience that we had, because it was an incredible experience. But we'll start with this idea that one trigger word for me or phrase is when people say soft skills, right? Kids need soft skills. Like I don't know how any of these are soft skills. I call them human skills. And I think I know we can talk more about AI and where technology is going, because I think we think we know, but we have no idea, right? Like, and I'll give you a couple of examples of why I say that. But given where technology is, given automation, given what we see the future of work, you can see it today, like productivity's up, but labor's down. You can see that automation's taking over. There's these cobots now, right, where you're literally working with robots, right, on an assembly line. Where you see technology going, I think and I've been talking about this for 15 years, but I think it's time to double down on what I call human skills. Not 21st century skills, today's skills, human skills. And what are those skills? I think I can touch on all of them, but just a couple top ones, right? Number one, I think, is self-awareness, right? So self-awareness, and we can get more into this idea of what does that mean in terms of consciousness and existence, but having self-awareness, and I don't mean it from a business perspective. I don't mean like Gary Vee saying you have to have self-awareness about what you're good at, what you're bad at. I'm talking about self-awareness of just your existence and that you're here, because machines don't do that, right? Machines don't know they exist, right? And so having self-awareness, understanding where your trigger points are, one of my projects that I want to work on is I want to write a freshman class, college class called the Management of Self, right? And it's this idea of like learning how to manage yourself in these situations. Instead of like speculating, instead of having anxiety, instead of freaking out, like learning how to breathe and stay in the moment, right? Being in the now is the most important thing that you can do. I actually watched you where were we? Where you were just doing this. We were somewhere, just like yesterday, and you were just like, and I'm like, and I can watch you, and you were just completely in that moment. You were observing everything around you. You were just taking it all in. I saw you doing that, right? And so those ideas of like that self-awareness. Number two is the ability to learn. I don't think there's a more important skill than the ability to learn, right? Taking a problem and knowing how to learn is the most important thing, because we have so much information at our fingertips. I think the saddest thing about I've been part of the internet since its beginning, and I think the saddest thing for me has been to watch the waste of it, right? Where people end up just scrolling versus learning, right? And there's so much you can learn. Like this year, I want to learn how to play the piano. I want to learn how to, a bunch of different things, but the idea is that you can learn all these things. Everything that you need to know is out there. It's just a question of, do you know how to use it, right? So self-awareness, the ability to learn. Obviously, problem solving and critical thinking are part of that as well, being able to do those things. And so those human skills is what gives us an advantage over the machines, right? Over the technology. And yes, there's a shift. You have 10,000 people doing this work, and now robots are gonna come in and do it. And so most people are going to lose that work and have to find other things to do. There's these transitions that we've gone through, and we've always gone through them. And so why wait to go through those transitions when we could be doing that now, if we can teach that? Another example to give you context for all of that is this idea of, why is math a subject, right? Why math isn't, Azella grew up thinking that life is just math is just life. Right? That everything has math in it. And that instead of like these lights have math, right?
Right.
This room has math. This building was made with math. That plant, oh, it's fake, but that plant, if it was real, would have math, right?
It still has math.
It still has
There
math,
still is
right?
math,
Yeah,
but,
yeah.
even if it's alive, everything is math, right? And so what is algebra and calculus and trigonometry and all these things, when in reality it's more important to say, we need to launch a shuttle or a satellite and orbit the sun so we get more data about the sun. What's the math that we need for that, right? And so the math goes from how do I count these 2 apples to how do I put a satellite that orbits the sun. Those are same math, right? And so one is just more complex than the other. And so it becomes more about solving problems using math. So I think that it's important to think about building those skills. And then how do you build those skills? I think a lot of it has to do with, clearly there's no such thing as learning styles. And I was like, I'm a visual learner. I'm like, oh yeah, cool. Yeah, no, I learned how to drive a car by reading about it. Everyone's a visual learner, right? Yeah. So it is this idea of how do you put those skills into practice? And how do you deal with all your senses to do that? And so it becomes not just about being in the classroom and experiencing it by yourself. It becomes about experiencing it with others, and then it becomes about being out in the world and experiencing it that way. So we had that.
You had a very unique experience to go out there to the world.
Yeah. So
So
we're both big space fans. Yeah. I'm a big space nut. And I'm an astrophotographer, so I do a lot of astrophotography. I love a lot of night pictures. That's another project I want to work on. We'll talk about that. I should have wrote these down. But the point is that we're both big space fans. There's an eclipse coming, and at the time, I'm like, it's going to be a pain in the butt. It's a shot in the dark, but let's do it. Let's just go. Dallas. Let's go to Dallas and do it. And I used my points. Cost us me no money, rented a car, and did it. But the best thing is that there was a couple of things. One is, I remember that morning, it was cloudy. There was a lot of people who canceled their plans because they were afraid that there was going to be too many clouds, right?
Actually, one of my friends at school, and I told them that I was going to do that, my friends were like, well, my mom said I was going to go, but it was like way too cloudy, so I'm not going to go anymore.
Right, and so
real quick. So Zella, how did you find out that you were going to go and do this trip with your dad? How did he share it with you?
He just told me.
He just told you? Okay.
Like, hey, do you want to see the solar eclipse? I'm like, yeah, I've never seen a solar eclipse before. Okay, let's go to Dallas.
Right,
all right, cool. All right.
And so we, and so there was a lot of people who had that, and to me, the miss there is that it has nothing to do with seeing the solar eclipse. It has to do with the journey of seeing the solar eclipse. Yeah. And I remember that morning we were having breakfast. It was a cloudy day. Yes, there was a 70% chance that it was going to be cloudy. And I looked at her and I said, look, we're going to see a solar eclipse. It might not be today, but we're going to see one. And this is just part of that journey.
That's cool.
And if we get to see it today, great. If we see it next year, if we see it in Africa or in 20 years, but we're going to see one, right? And so that was the goal, as opposed to making it short term. Yes. It just became the goal. And then we use technology, right? Which I think is, again, the way you use technology to figure out the best place to go to see. So we woke up and literally followed the clouds. And luckily for me, because I'm an astrophotographer, I have apps that track cloud movements, and I can do prediction models on where clouds are going to be. And so we found this tiny little town in the middle of nowhere. And what was it called? What was the name of the town? It's got some weird name.
It was a really weird name. It started with like an A.
No.
No, it's W. Started with
It's a crazy name. But we found this, they're driving, like literally following the maps, found a spot and set up. And it was still cloudy. And remember, you were like, oh my God, it's still cloudy. We're going to see it. And I'm like, look at the maps. Like, you got to trust the maps. You got to trust the process. And so by the time the solar eclipse started, a couple of things happened. One, people say that as a photographer, as anything that you're good at, people say there are moments where you lose all your skills, right? And they say that happens when you see the Northern Lights for the first time. And I actually did get to see the Northern Lights in Canada last year, and that did not happen to me. I was very calm through the process. But I lost my mind at the solar eclipse. Like,
he went like this.
I didn't know what, I like completely forgot. Like I left stuff in the truck. I couldn't set up. I couldn't remember my settings because at one point she's like, the solar eclipse has started. I'm like, what are you talking about? It hasn't started yet. And I look up, I'm like, oh my God, it has started. Like it had started the covering, right?
And it's just for a few minutes, right?
No.
How long was it gonna be?
It takes a while to get there.
Sure.
And then it's 4 minutes while it's covered.
Okay.
Well, no, not 4 minutes. This was the longest one. It was 4 minutes.
Where you guys were at?
It was usually like 2 minutes, but
Yes, it depends on where you are.
Got it.
But you, so I'm like losing my mind. Like I'm like in panic mode. And there's nothing to panic about. And she like grabs me, I'm leaning down and she grabs me by the shoulders. Bobby, it's okay. Calm down. Even if nothing works, you're still gonna see the solar eclipse. So just stay in the moment. Just stay here. And she calmed me down.
That's awesome.
And so I calmed down. I'm like, okay, I remember what I'm supposed to do. I set everything up, and I've got some amazing shots. But I'll say this: I watched, and here's the thing about experience versus learning, right? Learning through experience. I watched every video you could ever imagine about how to shoot the solar eclipse. I watched every setup. I watched people talk about solar eclipse. I watched about people's experiences, all that, and everyone says, you don't understand. You have to experience it. I can't describe it to you. It's just not like anything you've ever experienced before. And so you hear that over and over again, and it comes in one ear and goes out the other ear because you hear that a lot. And then you're there, and the moment happens when totality happens. And it is literally the most insane thing I've ever seen. I can't describe it to you. I cannot.
It's really different between totality and just like it just covering the sun like halfway.
Yeah, so like people from New York, they got 90, okay, it's one of those situations where 99% is not the same as
Yes, it is not the same.
It is not the, it is just something, I can look at it, I get chills thinking about it in my head right now when I see it, because it is just as giant as that light that's and all of a sudden it's just completely black and you see the corona around it.
It's
and,
like white.
And you feel like an Aztec Indian. You feel like I realized that all those ancient civilizations that like did all this work to like look for eclipse weren't doing science. They were chasing the high, because that's what it's just this human experience that has to be felt. Like I think something in your DNA connects with it. It's almost like it went like that, and it's almost like a clock. It was like click, and it just clicked. And I like screamed. It was so insane.
Yeah, you were screaming.
And I'm not an emotional, like, I'm not a rah-rah high five kind of guy, but it was I don't do high five at stadiums, and with you I do, but not with like strangers. But it was an experience with strangers that you have, right? And what was fascinating about it is that there are people who like chase eclipse, and then they go, the next day I was already booking space to see the one in 2026. Let's go over Iceland.
In Iceland.
Yeah.
And I'm like, if we don't see total eclipse, we're literally in Iceland.
Right. So that's a great space where I love Iceland. I've been there twice. Great place to be a photographer. But it was a surreal experience. Like that's all I can say. A very human experience. And I remember we went to the restaurant across the street afterwards, exhausted, right? Like totally exhausted, just from drained emotionally. And I got a message from American Airlines, and like, hey, your flight's canceled, right? We had to cancel your flight because there was these storms coming. And what a time to lose my status, because I haven't traveled like I used to, and so I'm no longer like an executive premier. I'm like a gold member, and this is a Monday. And like we've booked you on the next available flight, which would be Wednesday at 3:00 in the afternoon, right? They want me to stay in Dallas until Wednesday, but I looked at it and went, okay. We'll figure it out. And I put it down. and I called and we ended up in El Paso. We had an adventure. We had to spend the night in El Paso.
I had 2 hours of sleep that night. Yeah. I was very tired.
She officially became a traveler with me. She can go anywhere with me now.
He couldn't sleep that night because he was still thinking about it.
I couldn't sleep.
I woke up in the middle of the night because I was so tired, and he was just like this.
It was like in a movie scene where a person closes their eyes and they can still see the thing, and it's loud and it has noise to it. Yeah. So I say to people now, And we were, so the most you could cover the solar eclipse was 4 minutes and 29 seconds, right? That was the most you can get. We got 4 minutes and 19 seconds.
Wow.
So we were pretty close to that. My older daughter went to Canada to see it. She got to see it, but she only got about 2 minutes of it. Because by that time it was already at 2 minutes. Yeah. And I tell this to everyone who asks me about it. I'm like, sell your car and go see a go see a totality. I can't. There are just moments in life that you can never see again. And again, it's all perspective, right? Because like I don't believe in bucket lists. Like I don't think like I want to go to Italy. I want to go to Italy. I've never been, but it's not a bucket list item. I can just book a flight and go to Italy. My only item on my bucket list is I want to see the Earth from space.
Oh, there you go.
That's it.
Yeah, it's going to be
Possible.
more accessible.
You
Yeah,
can.
exactly.
Although I want to see the whole ball, but that I can. I don't have to be greedy that way. Yes. But the point is that experience that we had, and she missed a day of school to do it, 2 days of school. Well, you worked on your report the next day, but she missed a day of school to do that. That experience is worth anything that you could ever have in a classroom. Like what she learned about space and science and technology and all those things working together, and that experience.
Miss June could not do that. Sorry, Miss June.
She could, but I mean, she got to bring you there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What I love, Jamie, about what you and Azella are highlighting right now, right, is one of the concepts that we've been sharing too, right? That the human experience is really going to be the premier experience. It's going to be the premium experience of how we experience life, right, in the future, right? So even though as the world is getting more digitized and technologies become more prevalent, it does give us an opportunity to be also more human, right? And so it was thanks to technology to a certain extent and the role that it had to make the solar eclipse even accessible for not only yourself, but families all over the country, all over the world that were finding different unique ways to go and capture those 4 minutes.
Right.
So with that said, when we talk about experiences, we're wrapping up here too. Jamie, one of the things that you were an inspiration for me when we first connected was actually also thanks to technology, how we met. Right. Was me reaching out through you on LinkedIn. Yep. Over, now 6 years ago maybe. Yeah. But one of the things that you encouraged me to look at education also in a certain way was encouraging students, not asking them what they want to do when they grow up, but asking them what problem do they want to solve. Right. And that inspiration has only taken you and the journey you've been on education, but also as you speak to education leaders today about what does the future of education look like in these campuses or in these facilities is, hey, I want to bring in a student and just ask them, what problem do you want to solve? And give them all the tools that they have in these wonderful campuses because they have these experts all over the planet. Can you share with us a little bit more about not only what has your journey been in navigating and propagating that what problem do you want to solve message, but also how do you see the future of education with those lenses for Azella and for the next generation of students? Yeah, it's a great question because I think here's the thing about those, that it's actually a set of 3 questions, right? And those questions will never change. Why? Because it's directly tied into what motivates humans, right? So we're talking about human experience, we're talking about human skills. There's 3 things that motivate all humans, whether they realize it or not, right? It's the same 3 things: purpose, autonomy, and mastery. That's what motivates us, right? And when I came up with those questions, actually reading a couple different books, including my friend who ended up becoming a friend, Daniel Pink's book called Drive, where he talks about what drives humans, I looked at that and said, oh, purpose, what's the problem that you want to solve? Right? Autonomy, how do you want to solve it? Right. And that matters, I think, more than the first question. And then the third question, mastery, what do you need to learn to solve that problem? Because the first question could be, so what problem do you want to solve, right? If Azella says, let's say, well, she wants to solve climate change. I'm just saying you would, but let's just say that's what you said. Then the next question, and then an educator or someone in authority might say, oh, climate change. Oh, you need to go study the environment, global sustainable development. You need to go study environmental impact science and all these other things. You need to be a researcher, a scientist, policymaker. Well, like you said earlier, there's a billion ways to solve a problem. Well, maybe Azella is a talented singer and songwriter, and she can write a song about climate change. Maybe if you're doing video production, right, you can make
movies about climate change. You can write about climate. There's a million ways. So how do you, and I think this goes back to this idea of self-awareness, right? How do you want to solve it? Most kids don't know what they're good at. Most kids are only parroting what their adults or parents tell them what they think they're good at. And so the reality is that what problem you want to solve can change all the time. That question can change. And so that's about skills around problem solving and creativity and critical thinking. Second question, how do you want to solve it, right? Oh, I want to solve it through photography because I'm a talented photographer. And then what do you need to learn to solve it? You still might need to know environmental science. You still might need to go get a degree in the environment, because if you're going to photograph it, you should know about it. But you also need to develop photography skills. You need to develop other skills in that space. And so those three questions, right? What problem do you want to solve? How do you want to solve it? And what do you need to learn to solve that problem? To me, should be the model of how we focus on education, with the understanding that that problem will always change.
Right.
And even if it's under one topic, if I said to you what problem you want to solve and you said education, how many different ways are there to solve education? How many different angles to it? Early learning, middle school, high school, college, and enterprise learning, technologies, company, so many different ways to solve that, to focus on that problem. So I think that the process of problem solving is what the real focus should be. And that goes back to this idea of the skills, right? The problem solving, critical thinking, self-awareness, ability to learn. Those are the most important things to answer those three questions. But I think they're important and interesting questions to get into for any topic. And by the way, this is just for students. This is for a lot of aimless adults who don't know what they want to be when they grow up and are just doing work as opposed to living their lives and being in life.
There's this really interesting book, I think we referred it back in some of the previous episodes, called The Work by Wes Moore. And he talks about there's a difference between your job and your work, right? And so like your job title and what you're supposed to quote unquote do on paper will always change and evolve in time. But your work, that impact and that purpose, right, is really what continues. It also evolves in time, but there's different ways, right? And so I think on my personal journey, as I also left corporate America too, my work had not necessarily changed that much, right, since I left it, right? It's still very intentional, purposeful, connecting with folks, being very aspirational that the role technology could play. And so that resonates with me a lot too, Jaime.
Here's a couple other ways of thinking about it, right? So like when I think about, by the way, you can also make this 2 parts. But the other thing is, like if I think about my work at Google, if my purpose was to help solve education using Google stuff, and I was developing presentations and I was mastering presentation skills, and I was doing all those things, but the autonomy wasn't there, right? Where they gave me a script to read, I wouldn't do that, right? So that's an example of why all those 3 things matter. And why it's important to humans to have the autonomy to do those things. I think that's an important element to it. And then the other angle on it is just being able to think about this, which is when I hear from teachers who hear me say that at a presentation, and then they go back to their students with the mindset of like, oh, my kids are in 3rd grade, they're not gonna be able to, like, how mind-blowing of an experience it is for those educators to be like, the things that these kids came up with at like 10 years old, they know more than you think. They're more aware of the problems in the world than you think. And the answers that those kids would come, they would send me the poster boards of like all the ways the students wanted to solve problems. I think we underestimate human capacity and capability. And I think we put people into categories based on age. I have this whole rant that I'm on right now about I don't believe in age anymore. Like I don't talk about age, and not because I'm 50-something years old, but because there's nothing positive about age. And we never talk about age in a positive way. It's always, even when we think we do, oh, she's too young to be in college. He's too old for that job, or she's too old for him. Like what? And every aspect of age is a negative thing, right? When in reality, back to the idea of being different ages in a grade, that has nothing to do with it, right?
even a compliment is an age, because you're like, she's so good for her age.
Right. It's even a backward, insult, right? It's like, oh, look what you can do for your age, right? It's just everything about age is negative. And there's study after study that shows that if you put people in an age, they will behave that age based on the stereotypes that they have. There's Harvard studies of like taking 7-year-olds and convincing them that they're 20-something and their joints and bones get better, right? Like literally. So if you ask me how old I am, my answer is I exist.
So Jaime, so we're also having this recording in 2024, right? A year after it seems like AI became the most culturally, socially relevant term that everyone discovered.
Right.
And good, bad, and ugly ways, right? Artificial intelligence. Part of this conversation that we've been having about this podcast has been what I was sharing with you earlier, right? Was as the future gets more digitized, as AI becomes more relevant in our lives, it does give us also a unique opportunity to harness it and to work with it so we could create some more unique human experiences and expand what it is to be human today. From your perspective, I mean, you've been on this journey for several years as well. How do we guide, or what is your perspective on how do we guide folks today in the conversation around AI?
Yeah, that's a great question, because I think it's a stupid term, right? I do. I do. It's not a real term. I don't know who came up with it, but there's no such thing as artificial intelligence. It doesn't exist. Because what you're suggesting is that there's artificial intelligence that's relevant to human intelligence. And when you actually measure those two things, artificial intelligence is like 1/100th of a thousandth of the power of a human brain, right? It takes, 200,000 kilowatts to run a data server, right? I can do it on a banana, right? How is it possible that you're even comparing me to a thing, right? I can literally run my brain on a banana. I don't even need food. I need like 20 watts of power compared to what a data center has, right? So it's not even comparable. Give me that kind of power, give me that kind of energy, imagine what I can come up with, right? So it's not even, so it's a stupid term, right? Also, I'm creating this list on my phone right now because I know all this talk about Apple releasing new AI, artificial intelligence stuff with new Siri that's coming out at their I/O conference. And I have this list like, before you solve AI, can you solve these things for me? Including like when I hit the talk to text button, when it just spins, and then just decides to shut off.
Oh yeah.
I go insane with technology.
Or if you're in the middle of if you're like, hey Siri, what? And it just turns off.
Right, like solve that. Like
Can you solve Siri before you solve anything else?
Like before, it's a misnomer, that term, right? What it is you can take large data sets, feed it to a computer, and it can organize and spit that back the information to you much faster than a human can. Absolutely. That's not the same thing as intelligence, right?
It's like the next generation of search, basically.
Yeah. That being said, there is real technology that's coming that has nothing to do with the stupid, with Siri or even Google or Brad or whatever the hell that thing is. The real technology is around quantum computing. And the development of fusion, right? That's where we're talking about real technology, right? So quantum computing, here's the example. The quantum computer that Google had while I was still there in 2019, right? 2019 is like, 800 years ago in technology terms. It took a programming equation that you would feed the fastest supercomputer. It would take that supercomputer in a simulation 10,000 years to get to an answer. Google could do it in 200 seconds. That's quantum computing. That's processing stuff fast, right? That's going to change things. And then what we can do with fusion and the idea of being able to create basically naked energy, right? So since the 70s, 60s, we've been working on this idea is, can we feed energy into a source and create positive energy from it? We've never been able to do that. We did it a couple years ago. Now we've done it 3 times, and we're now 3x. Now we're talking about micro milliseconds of time right now, but eventually we're going to be able to produce limitless clean energy. You take limitless clean energy and quantum computing, now we're talking about real power. So all this other crap is just crap, right? This artificial intelligence is crap. But that being said, I would also say that because a lot of work is process work. A lot of work is sitting down and filling out forms. A lot of work is like you do the same thing every day. whether you are in a blue collar job or a white collar job. If you do that today, you have to be worried because that is replaceable with the technology, not artificial intelligence, but with the technology that we have. And so one of the things that I've always loved about my work and also been terrified of it is I always like to say that my work starts with a blank piece of paper, right? So ask yourself how much, I guess this is a phrase that I can coin, how much blank sheet of paper work are you doing today, right? Because that's really where human intelligence comes in. I think artificial intelligence can help us to get the answers. Also, we have to be careful because unlike humans, artificial intelligence doesn't know when it's lying to you, right? And so it only uses the information you feed it, right? So if a quick example would be if we use this room here and we fed a computer the population of this room, and then we asked the AI engine, right, how many women are there in this world? The AI engine will spit back none. There's one female child. That would be the answer, and they would be dead right.
Right.
So it's only as good as the information you feed it.
Yeah.
Humans don't work that way. And so I think that's the important part about AI to pay attention to. That being said, I think that there's some great benefits of taking all that information that's out there from ChatGPT or other things and using that in education so that students you're not asking them questions that ChatGPT can just spit back out, but you're asking them deeper questions that they actually have to think about. I think that's the real power.
So, Jaime and Azella, one of the things that we like to do as we wrap up was I would love to have y'all ask me any questions either about my journey or any perspectives.
Yeah.
This has been an awesome conversation, but anything that I could
I got a
share
question
with
for
them.
him.
All right, go ahead.
I got a question that we ask all the time.
Ooh.
Right? Which is, what would you do tomorrow if you won $800 million in Powerball today?
Oh, $800 million in Powerball today. What would I do?
You just won Powerball. You looked at it in the ticket. You won $800 million.
Love that.
What would you do tomorrow? Like, what would change?
What would change? Half of it, I would buy Bitcoin.
Oh my God.
Oh dear.
I can't believe you sat here this whole time.
I was going to get Jaime Azella's reaction. And then another actually good portion of it, I'll probably give it to my school and
I'm not asking you what you do with the money. What would you do? What would you personally do? Like, how is your life change tomorrow? If you
it won't change at all.
Okay, why? Like, what do you mean?
Because I still look forward to taking my kids to school every morning, picking them up in the afternoon. It's kind of like some of the highlights of the work I get to do, being a little bit more at home.
All right.
Still having lunch with my wife when I can, right? So yeah, it won't change my life. There's some things.
I think that's an important question to ask people, right? Because like we talk about all the time, and like, well, because I only play Powerball or Mega Millions when it's like past 800 million or whatever, right? Like, because when it's a regular 10 million, who's got time to pick that up? Like, I wouldn't even, if I won that, I wouldn't even go pick it up. It's not even worth it.
It's 10 million.
But it's a joke. But 800 million is real money, right? And so what we talk about is like, our life would just be like, we would have a helicopter. Right? Like we would just go back and forth to Flagstaff in a helicopter.
Yeah.
Or
like the only difference.
But you wouldn't
is that
change
we
your
would
house.
travel-
You wouldn't.
we wouldn't.
Yeah.
I wouldn't move.
I would want a pool though.
We would buy the houses next to us and tear
Fair
them down
enough. I
and
know
make a
that
big
one.
giant
Yeah, that
pool.
was really nice. Yeah.
Right. Things like that. Like we would do superficial things, but my life wouldn't
Our
change.
life wouldn't change.
As a matter of fact, they would fund all the projects I want to
Fair
work
enough.
on. Yeah.
So Jamie, real quick, as we
you have
wrap
any
up on that
questions?
too. Yeah, Azella, do you have
No,
any questions?
okay.
No.
You've been on this journey too. You've been sharing some of your journey transformation. Where can folks continue to follow this journey you've been on and the work that you have that you're excited about coming up next? You've hinted on some of that too.
Yeah. So a couple of things that I'm working on. One is like I mentioned, there's this class that I want to kind of create around the management of self. Right. I want to build something like that out. I also want to be able to take kids who grew up like I did. In the conditions that I grew up in, and take them out and to see dark sky, and have them photograph the universe. Have them really understand the place in the universe, because I think there's not a lot of people in this country that can go to poor black and brown kids and talk about how lucky they are, right? Because I get that, right? It's hard for if you're privileged or entitled to go to say to kids, you're lucky to be alive, right?
Yeah.
I can. And what I want to be able to say to them is, your existence is luck. The fact that you exist is just pure talk about Powerball. It's worse than Powerball, pure luck. And so I want them to see their place in the universe. I want to create these outward bound programs, if you will, that get kids out to see themselves in the universe, right? That's one of the things that I want to do. I want to work on, I want to be able to help a bunch of different companies in education really focus on the core things. But the core thing that I really am focusing on now, and people can follow me on Instagram or LinkedIn. You can add those to the show notes. But I'll be more active on LinkedIn starting Tuesday. It is, because the whole plan is this idea around, I spent 15 years at arguably one of the most innovative companies in the world during their heyday, from 2006 to 2020 when I left. And I got to witness this organization and everything that they did well and everything that they did poorly, all the mistakes that they made, from the perspective of someone with who had 7 years at Accenture as an organizational and culture consultant. So I got to watch culture at one of the most innovative companies. And I think I can help small companies, middle-sized companies, because you don't know when something's going to be bad for a number of years, right? And so I can tell you the things that Google did that were bad, that turned out bad, not at the time, but 10 years later, right? And so I want to be able to help those that are in that, like, not startup, not like 2 guys, but like 10 guys. Like, all right, we're ready to build out. This is how you build out your team. These are the things that are most important. These are the things that you should never compromise on. These are the guiding principles that you should use. And so I want to do some of that work as well. But they can follow me on Instagram and LinkedIn.
Awesome. And I know you also share a lot of Azella's story with
Azella's part of my Instagram life. She gets to see some of that. She doesn't have one yet, but she's on there a lot.
Love that. Well, Jaime, Azella, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having
us. Yeah, looking forward to seeing the engagement and everything that comes after this. Thank you so much for being here.
Cool, thanks.
Awesome, thanks.